Hi all, welcome to the A-Level Law Essay channel. In this episode, the essay is going to be covering the chapter Negligence in the Tort Law syllabus, and more specifically regarding psychiatric injury. Before we begin, please subscribe to my channel for more video guides on essay writing and many other interesting topics. With that said, let's get started with Part 1 Content Guide of Video Tutorial number 12. Question. The question reads, one day Hannah, who is an adult, took her little cousin Isaac, who is 5 years old, for an outing in a nearby shopping mall. Being a social media personality, she asked her friend Jenny to film the whole outing on her phone. The day of fun was streamed live on her social media page, with many of her followers viewing it, and one of them being Katrina, Isaac's mother. Throughout the whole outing, Hannah is seen in the video constantly facing and talking to her audience while Isaac is running around unsupervised in the background. Unaware to both Hannah and Jenny, Isaac proceeded to climb onto a moving handrail of a nearby escalator. Clearly within the phone camera's frame of view, Isaac fell off the handrail. Before Hannah or Jenny could react to the incident, Isaac was out of sight and a loud thud can be heard from the floor below, followed by frantic screams. After the whole debacle, Isaac received medical attention and survived the fall with only minor fractures on his skull. The whole incident was streamed online, and Katrina, along with other viewers, were completely traumatized by the incident. Advise Katrina and other viewers who now wish to sue Hannah and Jenny for the harrowing experience that they have been put through. To answer a scenario-based prompt question, it is important to first identify the relevant parties and the issues that they are having with each other. From the scenario, we know that the disputing parties are Katrina and the viewers against Hannah and Jenny. Due to Hannah and Jenny's irresponsibility while taking Isaac out, Isaac was filmed falling to his possible death. Katrina and the viewers who saw the whole incident online have now been traumatized by the whole experience and would like to sue Hannah and Jenny for the harrowing experience. After identifying these important things, we should then be able to figure out which chapter in the Tort Law syllabus this question is covering. By the looks of some of the key points in a scenario, it is safe to say that it covers the chapter General Negligence and that it focuses on duty of care, psychiatric injury, as we have to determine if Katrina and the viewers can claim for possible psychiatric injury they have suffered. Introduction. Upon determining that it is a general negligence question, we should start off by briefly defining tort and negligence. Here, we can say that negligence, being a major part in tort law, concerns an individual's recklessness and the kind of duties imposed on reckless individuals. In advising the defendants, it is always necessary to establish negligence on the defendant's part to see if any liability has been incurred for the injuries which the claimant has suffered. Because the question focuses on the topic psychiatric injury, we should briefly introduce this as well. The next thing we should do is to briefly highlight the characters and the tortious issues faced by the parties in the scenario. The thesis statement should explain that before we can determine if Katrina and the other viewers can sue Hannah and Jenny, we will have to go through the requirements of negligence, focusing on duty of care towards causing psychiatric injury. Point 1. Duty of care. In any general negligence situation, duty of care must first be established by going through the Caparo test under Caparo v. Digman, 1990. However, because the Caparo test mainly concerns physical injuries, it should only be mentioned briefly before shifting our focus to the issue with psychiatric injury. This is because, on the facts, Katrina and the viewers who saw the whole incident online have now been traumatized by the harrowing experience. Although a defendant has a duty of care towards the claimant's psychiatric injury, there are some restrictions to it. Firstly, the claimants must prove that they have suffered from a genuine psychiatric injury due to the actions of the defendant. There are many ways to define psychiatric injury, and Lord Bridge, in the case of McLaughlin v. O'Brien, 1983, described it as a positive psychiatric illness. This can include any medically recognized mental illness such as clinical depression, personality changes, post-traumatic stress disorder, etc. Based on the facts, we can assume that the experience has definitely caused them to suffer some form of recognizable psychiatric injury. However, to claim for psychiatric injury, the nature of duty of care would depend on whether the claimant is a primary or secondary victim. Point 2. Victims of psychiatric injury. The distinction between primary and secondary victims of a psychiatric injury and its importance is laid down by the case of White and others versus Chief Constable of South Yorkshire 1998. Primary victims are those who are put in danger of physical harm but actually suffered only psychiatric injury or suffered both physical and psychiatric injury, while secondary victims are those who are not put in danger of physical harm to themselves but suffer psychiatric injury as a result of witnessing such injury to others. The classic example to illustrate how one becomes a primary victim can be seen in the case of Duliu versus White and Sons 1901, where the defendant was found liable even though there was no physical impact on the victim, as he could have foreseen that the claimant would have suffered such psychiatric injury due to his actions. Applying this basic principle regarding primary victims, neither Katrina nor the other viewers were actually at the scene of the incident, or were they put in danger in any way since they only viewed the incident through a live media stream that is presumably from their mobile or desktop devices. Therefore, at this point, it is safe to say that the claimants are not primary victims and cannot claim against the defendant as so. However, there is a possibility for them to claim as a secondary victim of psychiatric injury. Point 3. Secondary victim of psychiatric injury. To qualify as a secondary victim, the claimants must satisfy the requirements under the case of Alcock versus Chief Constable of Yorkshire 1992. Firstly, the psychiatric damage must amount to a recognizable psychiatric illness which has been caused by a sudden and unexpected shock caused by a horrifying event. Applying this to the facts, there is definitely an unexpected shock as the horrifying incident happened on a live media stream. The case of Vernon versus Bosley 1997 can be mentioned to highlight the meaning of recognizable psychiatric illness, and Walters versus North Glamorgan NHS Trust 2002 to illustrate shock caused by a horrifying event. Secondly, the claimant must prove that he falls within the class of people which the law allows to claim compensation for such injuries. Applying this to the case, we can say that Katrina, who is Isaac's mother, definitely falls under the class of people who can make a claim. This is because Alcock's case makes it clear that relatives are the people most likely to succeed in an action for psychiatric damage as a secondary victim. But whether a claim succeeds will again depend on the facts of each particular case. As for the other viewers, the scenario did not mention as to who are these people and what sort of relationship they have with Isaac, and so as per McLaughlin versus O'Brien 1983, their status will depend on whether or not the courts would consider if the relationship to Isaac is, as a matter of fact, close. Thirdly, the claimant must have been present at the scene of the incident or its immediate aftermath so as to satisfy the requirements of proximity in time and space. Traditionally, witnessing an incident through the screen of a television doesn't satisfy this requirement for reasons such as novus actus interveniens on the part of the broadcaster, but it has also been accepted in Alcock that should the incident be broadcasted live, then there is nothing in between the incident and the viewer, and so we can say that this direct medium of communication has acted as a window or portal which satisfies the requirements of proximity in time and space. Now, because the incident was streamed live on Hannah's social media page with many of her followers viewing it, there is definitely sufficient proximity of time and space, making it seem as if the viewers are present at the scene of the accident. Point 4. Breach of duty of care. At this point, the issue regarding breach shouldn't be a problem and so therefore a quick definition and explanation of its legal principle will do. Case on point should be the main case of Nettleship v. Weston 1971 and its main legal principle regarding the reasonable standard of care that is required of people in conducting everyday activities. Briefly applying this to the facts, we can conclude that Hannah and Jenny have definitely breached their duty of care towards whomever they owe a duty of care to. Conclusion. Based on everything that has been discussed, we should now briefly point out some of the more salient points to determine whether the victims of the psychiatric injury can sue the defendants. Here, we should conclude that since there are no other issues regarding Katrina's relationship to Isaac, she can definitely sue Hannah as a secondary victim or even as a primary victim, if we want to continue discussing the concept of proximity further. However, I feel that it is unnecessary, especially when it is a problem-based scenario question which usually doesn't leave a lot of space for overwhelming critical thoughts. As for the other viewers, since the scenario didn't actually highlight who they are exactly, we definitely cannot determine as to their exact relationship to Isaac, and so therefore we can say that only those who satisfy the relationship requirements can claim as a secondary victim. Review. Before we end, let's have a quick review on the content guide. In the introduction, we briefly defined tort law, the requirements to establish general negligence, briefly mentioned psychiatric injury, and highlighted the facts and issue of the scenario before we moved on to the thesis statement stating our objective for the whole essay. In point 1, we develop our essay by establishing the requirements of duty of care to prove negligence. And because the scenario concerns psychiatric injury, we briefly define psychiatric injury and the two types of victims in this kind of situation. In point 2, we endeavored to define and discuss primary victims of psychiatric injury by giving case examples to explain the legal principle and in what situation a person who suffers psychiatric injury is considered as a primary victim. In point 3, we define and discuss secondary victims of psychiatric injury by going through the Alcock case requirements, highlighting the two biggest issues that might help the victim's case, which are the issue regarding relationship and proximity of time and space. In point 4, we briefly define and explain breach of duty of care and quickly establish that there is a breach on the defendant's part. We concluded it by summing up our discussion and highlighting some of the more important points in the whole content of the answer, and end the essay by stating that Katrina can probably sue Hannah and Jenny as, firstly, a primary victim or alternatively, a secondary victim. As for the other viewers, it is unlikely they can sue as we do not have sufficient information to make any conclusion. That is the end of the content guide for this video tutorial. If you have any questions or opinions on my approach to answering the question, please do comment below. Do check out part 2 of this video tutorial where I will go through with you a sample essay on this question. I will put a link to it in the description below. If you find this video tutorial useful, please like, share and subscribe to my channel for more. Thank you for watching and I'll see you again next time.